The details of the incident you are about to hear are all true. Sources can be found in the description below. On February 26, 1959, Mikhail Sharavin, a young Russian student, stood over a shredded tent. After nearly 6 days of searching through the snow, he'd finally found what he'd been searching for. He called over the other members of the search party, who examined the area closely. Mikhail would later write, quote, "The tent was half torn down and covered with snow. All the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind. The marks in the snow surrounding the tent were easy to read. All of the people who'd left the tent behind were either wearing socks, single shoes, or barefoot. The investigators examined the remains of the tent more closely and saw clear signs that it had been cut open from the inside." In 1959, a group of 10 Russian skiers set off on a cross-country expedition. They were led by Igor Dylatov, a 23-year-old radio engineering student. Most of them were Dylatov's fellow students at the Ural Polytechnical Institute in the Ural region of Russia. The purpose of their trip was to receive a Grade 3 hiking certification. In the Soviet Union, this certification was awarded only after a 300-kilometer or 190-mile journey was completed. The group's last contact with the outside world happened at the small town of Evdel, where the group reportedly purchased bread and spent the night before starting their expedition. The following morning, the 10 hikers began their journey. One of their members, a 21-year-old man named Yuri Yudin, suffered from chronic health problems. He decided to turn back due to his knee and joint pain, making his way back down to Evdel. He would be the only survivor of the expedition. We can track the party's next few days through their journals and other clues they left behind. One such clue is a cache of food and equipment they left in a valley, apparently expecting to use it as they made their way back down. A day after leaving the food and equipment, they began moving through a pass. It's theorized that they were attempting to cross the entire pass in just one day. For an unknown reason, possibly poor weather conditions, they were blown off course, instead hiking up the western slope of the pass. Somehow, they discovered their error. A mile downhill was a wooded area that would have given far better protection from the wind and the elements. But instead of continuing on or heading to the woods, the group decided to make camp for the night on the slope. Yuri Yudin, the sole survivor, made this guess, quote, "Dylatov probably did not want to lose the altitude they had gained, or he decided to practice camping on the mountain slope." From here, what exactly happened is up to guesswork and interpretation. What isn't up to interpretation, however, are a series of facts. Fact number 1. The hiker's tent had been torn open from the inside, apparently by the hikers. Fact 2. The hikers had run into the night without any form of illumination, coats, or footwear. Fact 3. At the edge of the woods, nearly a mile away, bodies of 2 of the 9 hikers were found beside the remnants of a fire. They were without shoes and dressed in nothing but their underwear. Fact 4. Branches of the tree beside the 2 bodies were seen to be broken up to 15 feet up, suggesting that someone had climbed the tree. Fact 5. 3 additional bodies were found spread out between the tree and the tent, including Dylatov. The poses of their bodies suggested that they were attempting to return to their tent. Their bodies were separated by hundreds of meters. The final 4 hikers' bodies were found not towards the tent, but deeper into the woods. Evidence suggests that these hikers survived for longer. It appears that these 4 scavenged the meager clothes from the bodies of the hikers who had died earlier. Fact 7. 3 of these 4 final hikers died not of hypothermia, but of blunt force trauma. 2 of them had major chest fractures, as if from an impact, and 1 had a skull fracture. The force required to sustain these injuries was compared by an investigator to a car crash. Fact 8. There were no survivors. Over the decades since the incident, there have been dozens of theories put forward regarding the cause of these deaths. Before I get into them, I want to lay down what I feel are the 2 central problems that any theory must try to explain. The first problem is that this group of experienced climbers cut their way out of their tent in sub-zero temperatures, running out into the night without shoes or proper clothes. What this says to me is that they were trying to get away from something as fast as possible. The second is that whatever caused the deaths of these last 3 hikers must have been something capable of causing extreme force. Remember, they had broken ribs and skulls. An unlikely explanation for their injuries is that the 3 hikers were found at the bottom of a small ravine. It's been postulated that perhaps a fall into this ravine caused the injuries, but I find that a bit hard to believe. A short fall caused 3 people to suffer severe chest injuries, but not arm or leg injuries? With that being said, here are a few proposed explanations. Number 1. Avalanche fear. This theory states that all the campers woke up in the middle of the night to hear an avalanche approaching. They were in a hurry and so cut through their tent to escape the snow, leaving their clothes behind to avoid being swept away. When the group made it to the relative safety of the woods, they realized that no avalanche was coming. Some started a fire, while others attempted to return to the tent for supplies. The broken ribs in the skull occurred when the remaining 4 went deeper into the woods and were caught up by another avalanche, breaking their bones while searching for a better shelter, falling into the ravine. This theory explains why the campers would have left their tents in a hurry, and does a fair job of explaining their injuries and positions. There's just one problem. When the explorers arrived at the area, there were none of the telltale signs of an avalanche, not around the tent and not near the bodies. Also, in the half-century since the incident, not one avalanche has been recorded in the Dylatov Pass. So, the best and most simple explanation falls apart. Number 2. Military tests. Another explanation alleges that the Russian government was experimenting with parachute mines. Parachute mines are massive bombs dropped from airplanes that explode in midair. According to sources, the Soviet military was experimenting with these bombs in an area that included the Dylatov Pass. This explanation would fit with the campers waking in a state of shock and disorientation, cutting their way out of the tent and running from the bombing area. Perhaps upon reaching the trees, the bombs stopped. Dylatov and the others attempted to return to the tent for supplies, and were unable to reach before succumbing to the cold. This also explains the injuries of the final 4 hikers. If they wandered into the blast zone, they'd certainly be hurt. A problem I see with this theory is that if a bomb was powerful enough to break ribs, it almost certainly would have left markings on the trees in the area. Perhaps the search team members were not trained to look for these markings, but it's hard to believe that none would have been left at all. Number 3. Creature attack. The final theory put forward is that the hikers were attacked by a creature in the night. Perhaps they heard it through the tent by the entrance and cut through the back to escape, fleeing into the woods. Once they reached the woods, the hikers realized that they'd stand no chance without supplies. So they attempted to return to the tent, but froze before they could make it back. Perhaps this same creature met up with the final 4 hikers and attacked them, causing their injuries. Whatever happened in Dylatov Pass, it's likely we'll be learning more about it. According to CNN, the Russian government is reopening an investigation into the incident. Perhaps the new investigators will come across some piece of evidence that the other investigations missed. I hope you all enjoyed this video. It's the first real-life story I've covered on this channel, so if you enjoyed, leave a like below and comment if I should make more. As always, I'm supported by my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. If you'd like to receive a free PDF of my future novels, support me there. Thank you for watching. Click the link on the screen now to hear a fictional horror story that I've written and narrated. The world has many corners that are remote and unseen. If you plan to venture into them, you must be wary of what you may find. I hope you've enjoyed your time on Worchester Street.